Welcome once again to Lehto's Law. Here's Steve Lehto.
Kim tipped me off to some updates about a story I've not covered yet on this channel, but I've been following it, and it's interesting. Out of South Dakota, the Attorney General was involved in an auto accident in which someone died, and the circumstances surrounding it as they unfold are becoming stranger and stranger. So from the New York Post, the headline was, "I discovered the body. South Dakota AG issues statement on fatal crash." So first we're going to talk about what happened then, and we're going to talk about what happened recently. The South Dakota Attorney General said he actually discovered the body of a pedestrian that he fatally struck Saturday night when he returned to the scene a day later. By the way, Vincent Barone wrote this article. The AG issued a 2-page statement claiming that he didn't realize that he'd hit someone on the side of the road and had assumed it was a deer until he returned back on Sunday morning. The AG said the crash occurred as he was driving home from a fundraiser, and he added he did not have any alcoholic beverages before, during, or after the event. He wants to make that clear because that's obviously some people were wondering about, and I'll explain why in a minute. He said, "I immediately called 911 to report the incident, and the sheriff came to the scene. I looked around the vehicle in the dark and saw nothing to indicate what I had hit. At no time did either of us suspect that I'd been involved in an accident with a person," the AG went on to say. He does not say, however, where his car was in relation to what he hit when he talked to the police. So in other words, if he hits somebody here and then drives down the road a quarter of a mile and stops, calls the police and says, "Hey, look around the car, there's nothing here," that would be an interesting thing to look at. So the sheriff and the AG then struck a deal where the AG would borrow the sheriff's personal car to drive home because the AG's car was too damaged to drive. The AG said he found the body of the pedestrian the next morning because he and his chief of staff were passing by that scene to return the sheriff's vehicle. He said, "I discovered the body in the grass just off the roadway. My chief of staff and I checked, and it was apparent that the man was deceased." The man who got killed was walking on the side of the road at the time of the crash toward his own vehicle that was in a ditch nearby, according to his cousin, who gave an interview to the Argus Leader. The AG then said, "I immediately drove to the sheriff's home to report the discovery, and he accompanied me back to the scene. Once there, the sheriff instructed me that he would handle the investigation." AG said he's fully cooperating with the ongoing investigation, which is being conducted by the State Highway Patrol with the assistance of the Bureau of Criminal Investigation and the governor as well. And again, that's according to the New York Times. AG said he would not be taking any questions on the crash during the investigation, that he only issued a statement to dispel some of the rumor and innuendo being spread as the news broke of the man's death. And of course, the rumor and innuendo surrounds why he didn't discover the body until the next day. So I am deeply saddened by the tragic nature of these events, and my heartfelt condolences go out to the family. And you notice he doesn't say, "I'm deeply saddened by the tragic nature of what I did," or that I'm sorry for what I have done, but he's simply saddened by these events and the tragic nature of them. So that, I think, is also another reason that people are criticizing him these days. So this investigation was ongoing, and during the investigation, they apparently brought him into the station and asked him some questions. So he is the Attorney General, so he apparently felt that it was okay for him to speak to the police, and they videotaped it, and they have these videotapes that have now been released. So the headline of the most recent New York Post article on this, written by Tamar Lapin, says, "Victim's glasses found in car of South Dakota AG who said he had hit a deer." So the glasses of the victim were inside the car. We'll explain. So he said he'd hit a deer, but he'd actually struck a pedestrian. But they found the victim's glasses inside his car. The state's Department of Public Safety on Tuesday released recordings of investigators questioning the Attorney General about the crash that left a 55-year-old man dead. The crash was in September, and 2 days after the crash, he gave an interview where detectives told him that they had discovered a pair of broken glasses on the front passenger floorboard of his vehicle. During a second sit-down on September 30th, interviewers asked about those glasses again, telling him they did in fact belong to the victim. The agent says they're Joe's glasses, referring to the victim, so that means his face came through your windshield. Upon hearing that, the AG looked down and sighed and shook his head. And then he said, "I did not see those glasses until you showed them to me." The agent told the AG that the only way for them to get there is through the windshield. His face was in your windshield. Think about that. The AG maintains that he didn't see the glasses until the investigators showed them to him, and that he truly didn't realize he'd hit a person at the time of the crash. I did not see him. I did not see anything, he insisted. I did not know it was a human until the next day. An investigator replied, "You think you had an idea it was something other than a deer?" And he responds, "I just believed it was a deer. I do." So he sticks to his guns, saying he thought it was a deer. So after the crash, though, he told authorities that he thought he'd plowed his 2011 Ford Taurus into a deer or another large animal. As he drove down Highway 14, he was on his way home from a GOP fundraiser, and he's 44 years old. He was charged in the incident last week and faces counts of careless driving, operating a motor vehicle while using a mobile electronic device, and veering out of his lane. So apparently they're going to go with the theory that he'd been doing something with his phone. It caused him to veer out of his lane. He's careless in doing so. But of course the issue is that it caused the death of somebody. Quite often if you're involved in an incident in traffic with your automobile and it kills somebody, they can escalate those charges because of the death of somebody. And they're often looking at what caused you to drive so poorly. And one of the things that jumps to mind is whether or not you're using alcohol. I'm speaking in very general terms here. So I remember when I was driving a tow truck back in the day, I encountered situations where the police found a car that had been abandoned by somebody after getting in an accident. And the person ran away because they had alcohol in their system. And they would then turn themselves in the next day at the police station and go, "Oh yeah, I went home and fell asleep. I meant to come in." Well, they can get you for leaving the scene of the accident, but it's hard to prove you had the alcohol in your system because it's gone now. So that's what a lot of people were speculating and having innuendo about with this case. And when he issued a statement to say dispel some of the rumor and innuendo, that is what a lot of people were thinking. So I'm not saying it's true. I'm just saying that's what a lot of people were thinking. The authorities said the evidence did not support more serious felony charges and that the AG was not intoxicated at the time of the incident. Of course, I'm not sure how we would determine that. I guess if the sheriff who came to the scene didn't think he looked intoxicated, that may be what plays into it, but it doesn't sound like they did any sobriety tests or anything of that nature. The Attorney General was elected to his first term in 2018, but South Dakota House lawmakers have begun impeachment proceedings against him following the release of the interviews and other materials from the investigation. Lawmakers argued in the impeachment resolution that the AG should be removed from office for his crimes or misdemeanors in office causing the death of the pedestrian. The governor, who is a Republican, called for the AG to resign shortly before the impeachment resolution was filed. She said, "Now that the investigation is closed and charges have been filed, I believe the Attorney General should resign. I've reviewed the material we are releasing starting today, and I encourage others to review it as well." The AG will not be stepping down, though, according to his spokesperson. And through his spokesperson, he released a statement. As an attorney and a lieutenant colonel in the Army Reserves, the AG has fought for the rule of law and personal liberties and would hope that he is afforded the same right and courtesy. That's what the statement says. So this is a strange one. But again, the AG driving late at night veers off onto the shoulder and kills a pedestrian, and then says to people who are investigating, "I thought I hit a deer." The next day, he drives by the same spot, and lo and behold, he spots a person who's deceased. He then calls the police again and says, "Oh, there's a guy out here apparently that I hit." And there are a lot of questions there. And unfortunately, there appear to have only been two people at the scene when this happened. The man driving the car and the man walking on the shoulder of the road. Now, the fact that the victim's glasses were found inside the car is such a fluke if you think about how that had to happen. But the fact that they were there would suggest that it would be very, very difficult for the driver of the car not to see that he'd hit a person, because that person hit the windshield and something on their face, their glasses, actually wound up inside the car. That is a very serious factual problem. And I assure you that if this Attorney General were acting as a prosecutor and somebody walked into his office and said, "These are the facts. Will you prosecute the driver of this car for leaving the scene of a fatal accident?" When they're going to argue and say they thought it was an animal, despite the fact that the glasses of the person wound up inside the car, he'd prosecute that case all day long. He'd jump on that. He'd say, "Yep, that's a no-brainer. Jump on that and prosecute it." So the fact that they've chosen to prosecute him the way they have seems like he got a break. A lot of this might be politics. I don't know. But it looks like the legislature is taking steps to impeach him. And I don't know how that'll turn out. I have no idea about the intricacies of South Dakota lawmaking. So we'll see what happens there. I've always questioned their campaign on meth, where it says meth, we're on it. But that's just a coincidence here. But the fact that the man who was killed, his glasses were found inside the car that hit him, the driver of that car saying, "I thought I hit a deer," does not seem terribly plausible. It does not seem plausible to me. So we'll see what happens. This story is going to go on for some more time. So if we get updates, I'll pass them along. Otherwise, Kim, thanks for sending it. Questions or comments, put them below. Let's talk to you later. Bye-bye.
Thank you for watching Lehto's Law. Happiness is meeting an old friend you haven't seen for years and picking up where you left off.